I was driving the state truck west on Highway 278 when the daylight started to go. Still had dust caked on my boots from the last washout check. Still had the taste of bad coffee from the thermos I'd killed around noon. The road was that kind of empty you get in February when nobody's heading anywhere good and the snow's mostly gone, but the cold hasn't quit. Christine rode shotgun with her camera bag wedged between her feet. She'd been quiet for maybe 20 miles, which wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual was how she kept leaning forward every few minutes to point out turnoffs I barely noticed. "There," she said. "That one." I glanced right. Dirt track disappearing into sagebrush and rock. Could have been a logging road. Could have been nothing. "What about it?" "Old digging. 1870s, probably." I looked at her. She was still staring at the turnoff even though we'd passed it. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. Just settled back in her seat and pulled the camera bag onto her lap, fingers working at the zipper like she was checking something inside for the third or fourth time that hour. I kept driving. Thing was, Christine knew her stuff. She worked documentation for the Historical Survey, spent most of her time cataloging mining claims and railroad spurs that didn't exist anymore. Made sense she'd recognize old sites. What didn't make sense was the way she said it, like she was tracking something. Like those abandoned diggings were calling to her and she was just marking where they were. "Another one," she said a few miles later. "Left side." I saw it this time. Faint ruts heading up toward a ridgeline, a couple of weathered posts that might have been a gate once. "You been out here before?" "No." "Then how?" "I just know." She turned to look at me, and her eyes had that flat quality they'd had for weeks now. "I can feel them." I didn't say anything to that. Wasn't much to say. The sun was dropping behind the Beaverhead Range, turning everything orange and cold at the same time. I had the heater running, but it wasn't doing much. Christine didn't seem to notice. She was wearing the same field jacket she always wore, same boots, but both of them looked too big on her now. That was the other thing I couldn't ignore. She'd lost weight. Not the kind you lose from skipping a meal or two. The kind that comes off slow and steady because you're not eating right and you're not sleeping and something's grinding you down from the inside. Her face was sharper than it used to be, cheekbones standing out, shadows under her eyes that makeup didn't cover anymore. And the ring was gone. She'd been engaged last fall. Some guy from Butte who worked IT and wore fleece vests and seemed fine, I guess. Normal. I'd met him twice, maybe. Didn't leave much of an impression either way. But Christine had worn that ring every day. Silver band with a small stone, and she used to twist it when she was thinking. Now her left hand was bare. Had been for a month. I hadn't asked about it. Wasn't my business. And Christine didn't invite questions. We worked together. Rode in the same truck most days. Split gas station sandwiches on long drives. That didn't mean we talked about personal stuff. But I noticed. "How much further?" she asked. "To where?" "Bannack." I frowned. Wasn't planning on stopping there. "We should. It's a ghost town, Christine. State park. Nothing's open this time of year." "I know what it is." She had her phone out now. No signal. But she was looking at something she'd pulled up earlier. A map, maybe. "We should stop." "Why?" "I need to see it." That phrase again. Need, not want. She'd been using it a lot lately. I need to check that archive. I need to drive out to Argenta. I need to see the old survey maps, like she didn't have a choice. I glanced at the dashboard. Quarter tank of gas. We had enough to get back to Dillon if we turned around in the next hour. If we detoured to Bannack and poked around a ghost town in the cold, we'd be cutting it close. "It'll be dark soon," I said. "I know." "And cold." "Leon." She looked at me, and there was something in her expression I didn't like. Urgency, maybe. Or certainty. "Please." I should have said no. Should have told her we had a schedule and a job and no reason to wander off into a historical site that had been abandoned for 150 years. Should have reminded her that the state truck wasn't for personal detours, and I wasn't getting written up because she had a hunch about old mines. But she'd said please, and Christine didn't say please very often. Fine, I said. 20 minutes, then we're gone. She nodded and turned back to the window. I took the turnoff about 10 miles later, just as the sun hit the horizon. The road to Bannack was paved at first, then gravel, then something that might have been gravel once, but was mostly just frozen dirt and potholes. The truck rattled over it fine. We drove past the entrance sign, Bannack State Park, established 1962, winter hours vary, and followed the road as it curved down toward the buildings. The town sat in a shallow valley, wooden structures lined up along a main street that probably looked the same as it did in 1863. Most of the buildings were intact, preserved by the state in the dry cold. Hotel Meade stood tallest, 3 stories of gray wood with a porch running the length of it. Beside it was the old Masonic Hall, then a row of cabins and storefronts, then the courthouse at the far end. And parked right in front of Hotel Meade was a rental SUV. White Chevy Tahoe, Montana plates, both front doors standing wide open. Nobody around. I slowed the truck and rolled into the lot, gravel crunching under the tires. Pulled up maybe 30 feet from the SUV and put us in park. The engine ticked in the quiet. That's weird, I said. Christine was already staring at it. Someone's here. Doesn't look like it. Both doors open meant someone had gotten out in a hurry, or they'd been sitting there with the doors open and then walked off. Either way, it was stupid. Temperature was dropping fast now that the sun was almost gone, maybe 20 degrees, and leaving your doors open in February was a good way to kill your battery and freeze your interior. I scanned the street, didn't see anyone. No movement in the buildings, no footprints in the patches of snow between the boardwalks. The whole place was dead quiet in that way ghost towns get when the wind drops and there's nothing alive to make noise. Stay here, I said. I climbed out of the truck and the cold hit me right away. Pulled my work jacket tighter and walked toward the SUV, boots loud on the gravel. Christine's door opened behind me. I said stay. I'm coming. I didn't argue. Wasn't worth it. The SUV was new, maybe a 2023 rental. Still had that chemical smell inside, air freshener and plastic. Keys were in the ignition, engine off. I leaned in and checked the dash. Gas was at half. Nothing on the seats except a wadded up Subway wrapper and a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder. Glove box was closed. I popped it. Rental agreement, insurance card, couple of napkins. The name on the agreement was Susan Riley, address in Bozeman. Anything? Christine was standing a few feet back, arms wrapped around herself, scanning the buildings. Rented to someone from Bozeman. That's it. Where are they? No idea. I stepped back and looked around. The street ran maybe 200 yards, buildings on both sides, everything boarded up or locked. If Susan Riley had gotten out of her SUV and gone exploring, she could be in any of them. Or she could have walked the trails behind the town, up toward the old cemetery or the mine shafts in the hills. But you don't leave your doors open when you go for a walk. You lock up and take your keys. Maybe they're in one of the buildings, Christine said. Maybe. She was already moving toward Hotel Meade, that same purposeful walk she'd had for weeks. Not hesitant, not curious, just certain. Christine. She kept going, stepped up onto the porch and tried the door. Locked. Moved to the window and cupped her hands to look inside. I turned back to the truck to grab my flashlight, and that's when I felt it. Not heard it. Felt it. The air had changed, gone heavier maybe, or just still in a way that didn't match the valley. I looked east toward the entrance road and the gate was still open, the metal arch with the park name on it just visible in the fading light. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out. No signal. That was normal out here, but I checked anyway. Nothing. Leon. Christine was waving me over to the side of Hotel Mead, where a narrow gap led back toward the rear of the buildings. I walked over, gravel giving way to hard-packed dirt, and she pointed down the gap. Footprints, fresh ones, pressed into a thin layer of snow that hadn't melted yet. Boot treads, decent size, leading away from the street toward the back lots. Someone walked through here, she said. Recently. We should follow them. I looked at the prints, then at Christine, then back toward our truck. The state-issue Ford 250 parked with the nose facing out, ready to leave. Smart parking. That's what I always did. Block the wind, face the exit, be ready to move. Except now the idea of leaving felt urgent in a way I couldn't explain. Let's go, I said. We walked back to the truck and I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key. Nothing. Dashboard stayed dark. No lights, no chime, no dash glow. I tried again. The starter didn't even click. What's wrong? Christine was in the passenger seat, door still open. Battery's dead. It was fine 2 minutes ago. I know. I popped the hood and got out, walked around front and lifted it. Battery terminals looked fine. Cables tight. No corrosion, no loose connections. I checked the alternator belt. Fine. Everything looked fine. I got back in and tried the key again. Nothing. My phone was still in my hand. I checked it again. Still no signal. I switched to the radio, the state band unit mounted under the dash. Turned it on. Static. Just hiss and crackle. No voices, no emergency band. Nothing. I cycled through the channels. All static. Leon. Christine was looking past me out the driver's side window toward the entrance road. The gate was closed. I stared at it. Big metal gate. The kind that swings across the road on a manual hinge. It had been open when we drove in. I'd seen it. 30-foot span of tube steel painted green, standing wide to let vehicles through. Now it was shut. Latched across the road like someone had walked over and swung it closed and locked it. Did you see anyone? I asked. No. I opened my door and stepped out. The air was colder now, or maybe I just felt it more. I walked toward the gate, boots loud again, breath fogging in front of me. Nobody there. No park ranger, no caretaker, no Susan Riley from Bozeman. Just the gate, closed and latched, and the road beyond it disappearing into the hills. I grabbed the latch and pulled. Locked solid. Behind me, Christine was still sitting in the truck, door open, staring at the buildings. The town had just locked us in. I stood there at the gate for probably 30 seconds, just looking at that latch. Solid steel. The kind of hardware you can't force without tools I didn't have. The padlock wasn't even rusted. Clean brass, newer than the gate itself. Christine's voice came from behind me. Leon? I turned. She was still by the truck, but she'd stepped out now. Both hands on the open door. We need to check the SUV, she said. I need to figure out how we're getting out of here. Check the SUV first. She wasn't asking. That tone had been showing up more the past few weeks. Flat, certain. The way you'd tell someone the sky was blue. I walked back across the frozen dirt. My breath came out white. The temperature was dropping fast now that the sun was down. Maybe 15 degrees. The kind of cold that finds every gap in your jacket. There's a reason it's here, Christine said when I got close. There's a reason the doors are open. Yeah, someone left in a hurry. Or they wanted us to look. That bugged me a little, the way she said it. But she wasn't wrong about needing to check. If someone was stranded out here, injured maybe, we had a responsibility. I pulled the mag light from my belt and clicked it on. The beam cut white across the Tahoe's interior. I stepped up to the driver's side first. The door was cold when I touched it, metal sucking the heat right out of my palm. I leaned in and swept the light across the front seats. Subway wrapper on the dash, same one I'd seen before. Water bottle in the cup holder, maybe a third full. The rental agreement was still visible in the glove box, that name in block letters. Susan Riley. I moved the beam to the back. Diaper bag. Navy blue with yellow ducks printed on the side, sitting upright on the seat behind the driver. The kind with a dozen pockets and a changing pad that rolls out. One of the side pouches was unzipped, and I could see the corner of a pack of wipes inside. My stomach dropped a little. I shifted the light lower. On the floorboard behind the passenger seat was a small cooler, the soft-sided kind. Red fabric. The zipper was halfway open, and I could see the corner of a juice box inside. The foil pouch kind. The ice had mostly melted. There was a dark water stain spreading across the carpet underneath. "What is it?" Christine asked. She was right behind me. I hadn't heard her walk up. "Family," I said. "She's got a kid with her." Christine leaned past my shoulder, looking in. She didn't say anything. I pulled back and moved around to the passenger side, boots crunching on the frozen ground. The door was open wider here, angled out about 60 degrees. I aimed the light at the seat. A wallet, brown leather, women's style, sitting right in the middle of the passenger seat like someone had placed it there deliberately. Not dropped, placed. I reached in and picked it up. The leather was cold and stiff. I flipped it open. Driver's license in the clear sleeve. Montana State ID. The photo showed a woman with shoulder-length brown hair, smiling the way everyone does in DMV pictures. Polite, but not quite real. The name read Susan Marie Riley. Address in Bozeman. Date of birth made her 29. The license didn't expire for another 2 years. "Susan Riley," I said, mostly to myself. Christine was at my elbow now, close enough I could hear her breathing. Short, shallow pulls. I checked the other slots in the wallet. Debit card, credit card, insurance card, grocery store rewards card, $17 in cash, a 10, a 5, and 2 ones. Everything you'd expect, everything normal. I closed the wallet and set it back on the seat. That's when I saw the windshield. At first, I thought it was just dirt, a smudge from someone's hand. But when I angled the flashlight up, the mark caught the light different. Greasy. Deliberate. A circle, maybe 6 inches across. Drawn in what looked like finger marks, the lines thick and uneven, and running through the middle of the circle, top to bottom, a single, straight line. I stared at it for a few seconds. The grease had an odd sheen to it, yellowish under the flashlight beam. "You see that?" I asked. "Yes." "What is it?" Christine stepped closer, her head tilting as she studied the symbol. Her face was hard to read in the dim light, but I caught something in her expression. Recognition, maybe. "It's a miner's mark," she said. "For what?" "Bad air." She said it quiet, matter of fact. They draw it at a tunnel mouth or a shaft opening, warning for the next crew. It means there's gas or something else that could kill you before you knew it was there. I looked back at the greasy circle. The line cut straight through the middle, clean and deliberate. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I just do." There it was again, that certainty. I didn't push it. I stepped back from the SUV and swept the flashlight in a slow arc across the ground. The beam picked up our boot prints from earlier, the tread marks clear in the thin layer of snow. But there were others too, older maybe, harder to make out in the dark. Something felt wrong. Not just the mark on the windshield, the whole setup. Wallet left on the seat, doors wide open, keys still in the ignition. I circled around the back of the Tahoe, keeping the light low. My breath was coming faster now, white clouds hanging in the air. The rear tires were on the far side, driver's side rear first. I crouched down and aimed the beam at the rubber. The tire was flat, completely flat, the sidewall sagging against the frozen dirt. But it wasn't a puncture from a nail or a blowout from driving. There was a cut, clean, horizontal, maybe 4 inches long, starting low on the sidewall where you wouldn't see it unless you were looking. The rubber was still shiny along the edges of the cut. Fresh. I moved to the passenger side rear. Same thing. Flat tire. Clean slash. Low to the ground. Deliberate. My chest tightened. I stood and walked back toward the state truck. Faster now. Christine followed without a word. When I got to the driver's side, I dropped to one knee and shined the light at the front tire. Flat. The cut was identical. Low on the sidewall, clean edges. Rubber still wet looking where it had been sliced. I moved to the rear tire on the same side. Same thing. Leon, Christine's voice was tight. I see it. I stood up and checked the other side. Both tires on the passenger side were fine, still holding air. Whoever did this had only cut 2 per vehicle, just enough to make sure we weren't going anywhere. I straightened up and turned in a slow circle, scanning the buildings with the flashlight. The beam hit the side of Hotel Mead, the gray wood soaking up the light. Nothing moved. No sound except the wind starting to pick up, a low whistle through the gaps in the storefronts. Whoever did this was still here. Had to be. The cuts were too fresh, the rubber still shining, and they'd done it while we were standing right here. Maybe while I was at the gate or checking the SUV the first time. That meant they were close. Watching, maybe. The thought made my skin crawl. I clicked off the flashlight. My eyes needed a second to adjust, but I didn't want to give anyone a target to follow. We need to... Christine started. The bell cut her off. It came from somewhere up the street, past Hotel Mead. A single metallic clang, low and hollow. The kind of sound an old bell makes when the clapper hits rust. I froze. Another clang, then another. Slow at first, maybe one every 2 seconds. Deliberate, then faster. The rhythm picked up, the clangs coming quicker, overlapping now, until it wasn't individual strikes anymore, but a continuous ringing. High and sharp and wrong. It climbed in pitch, turning into a siren that made my teeth hurt. The kind of sound that gets inside your skull and won't let go. I grabbed Christine's arm. We need to move. She didn't resist. Her eyes were locked on the street, on the buildings where the sound was coming from. The siren kept going, rising and falling now in waves. It bounced off the storefronts, echoing back on itself until I couldn't tell where it was coming from anymore. Then I saw it. Movement. Between 2 buildings on the left side of the street, maybe 50 yards up. Just a flicker at first, pale against the dark wood. I clicked the flashlight back on and aimed it. A face. Pale. Too pale. White enough to catch the beam and throw it back. The eyes didn't reflect right. Flat and colorless. No pupils I could see. Just white. It didn't move. Just stood there in the gap between the buildings, staring. I grabbed Christine harder, pulling her toward me. We're leaving. Now. I pulled Christine toward the entrance road. Her arm felt thin under my grip. Thinner than it should have been. The siren kept climbing and falling behind us, and I didn't look back at whatever that face was between the buildings. Just moved. Come on, I said. She didn't fight me. That should have been good, but it wasn't. She just followed, her boots crunching the frozen dirt at the same pace as mine. The gate was still closed when we got there. Same green-painted steel tube blocking the road, but when I got closer, I saw the chain. It was looped through the gate frame and wrapped around the support post on the right side. Bright silver links, thick as my thumb. The kind of chain you'd use to secure heavy equipment or a livestock trailer. It caught the last bit of daylight and practically glowed. There was a padlock threaded through the end links. Also new. Also silver. The keyhole was clean, no scratches, no dirt. I stopped 2 feet from it and Christine stopped beside me. That wasn't there before, I said. She didn't answer. I'd been at this gate maybe 10 minutes ago, 15 at most. The latch had been locked, but there'd been no chain. I was sure of it. I would have noticed a chain that bright. I reached out and grabbed it with both hands. Cold bit through my work gloves. I yanked hard, pulling the chain taut between the gate and the post. It didn't give, didn't rattle, didn't shift even a quarter inch. I pulled again, planting my boots and using my shoulders. Nothing. The links were solid and the padlock held tight. I let go and stepped back. My breath came out in white clouds. "Someone's doing this," I said. "Someone's here." Christine tilted her head, not looking at me. Looking past the gate, down the access road that led back to the highway. Her expression was calm. Too calm. "Christine." She turned. "There's a landline." "What?" "In one of the tour buildings. They have to have a phone for emergencies." I stared at her. "You're not surprised?" "About what?" "The chain, the gate, any of this." She blinked slow. "We need to find a phone." The siren was still going behind us. That rising, falling wail that didn't sound mechanical anymore. It sounded wet. I don't know how else to describe it. Christine started walking back toward the main street. Not fast, just steady. "Christine, wait." She kept going. I looked at the chain one more time. Thought about trying to climb the gate, but it was a good 8 feet tall, and the top had a crossbar that'd make it awkward. And even if I got over, then what? Leave Christine here? Run 5 miles in the dark to the highway and hope someone drove past? I figured she was right about the phone. If this was a state park with tour buildings and visitor services, there had to be a landline somewhere. Even if the office was locked, I could break a window, get inside, call for help. No clean choices. I turned and followed her back toward the truck. The state Ford sat where we'd left it. 2 flat tires on the driver's side, sagging low. I went to the back and dropped the tailgate. The metal clanged and the siren seemed to answer it, rising higher for a second before dropping again. My road kit was in a green canvas duffel wedged behind the toolbox. I pulled it out and unzipped it on the tailgate. Flashlight, the big mag light I'd already been using, still clipped to my belt. Multi-tool in a leather pouch, a roll of duct tape, a space blanket still in the wrapper, a first aid kit the size of a lunchbox, and the flare gun. I kept the flare gun for accident scenes. If I came up on a wreck in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, I could fire a flare and maybe get someone's attention. It was a cheap model, bright orange, plastic, single shot. I had 4 flares in the kit, each one about the size of a shotgun shell. I picked it up, checked the chamber, empty. I loaded 1 flare, then shoved the other 3 in my jacket pocket. The gun felt light and awkward, but it was something. Christine was standing by the Tahoe, looking up the main street. The siren kept going. "Let's move," I said. She nodded and started walking. I kept the flare gun in my right hand, down by my side. My left hand held the mag light. I didn't turn it on yet. There was still just enough daylight left to see the buildings as dark shapes against the sky. We passed Hotel Mead on the left. 3 stories, gray wood, the porch empty. No movement in the windows. Christine walked a few feet ahead of me. She didn't look left or right, just straight ahead, like she knew exactly where she was going. "Which building?" I asked. "We'll find it." That wasn't an answer, but I didn't push. The siren was getting louder, or maybe we were getting closer to it. Hard to tell. The sound bounced off the storefronts and came at us from every direction. Then I saw the church. It was on the right side of the street, set back maybe 20 feet from the row of buildings. Small. White clapboard siding with a simple steeple and a cross on top. A wooden sign out front read, "Bannack Methodist Church, Est, 1864. The front door was open. Not just unlocked, open. Standing wide, maybe 40 degrees, with warm yellow light spilling out onto the dirt. Candlelight. I stopped walking. Christine stopped too. "You see that?" I asked. "Yes." The light flickered. Shadows moved inside, but I couldn't tell if it was just the candles or something else. "Stay behind me," I said. I stepped off the main path and crossed the 20 feet to the church. My boots crunched through a thin crust of snow that hadn't been disturbed. No footprints leading to the door. No footprints anywhere around the building. The siren felt closer now. It was coming from somewhere past the church, deeper in town. I reached the door and stopped just outside. Listened. Nothing. Just the siren in the distance and the sound of Christine's breathing behind me. I clicked on the mag light and raised the flare gun. Then I stepped inside. The interior was one room. Wooden floor, wooden walls, wooden pews arranged in 2 rows with an aisle down the middle. A small pulpit at the front. 6 candles burning in iron holders, 3 on each side of the aisle. And mannequins. There were maybe a dozen of them sitting in the pews. Period clothing. Long dresses on the women, vests and shirts on the men. Wax faces with painted eyes and frozen expressions. The kind of display you'd see in a historical park to show what a Sunday service looked like in the 1860s. But their heads were wrong. Every single one of them was turned toward the aisle. Not forward, facing the pulpit. Turned. Twisted at the neck. Some of them at angles that looked painful, even though they were just mannequins. Their faces were all pointed at the center aisle like they'd been watching something walk past, or like they were watching me now. I swept the flashlight across them. The beam caught their glass eyes and made them shine. None of them moved. Obviously, they were mannequins. But someone had repositioned them. Recently. You don't set up a historical display with everyone's head turned the wrong way. That's not how it's done. Christine stepped in behind me. I heard her boots on the wood floor. "Lay on," she said. I turned. She was looking past me, past the pews at the back wall. I followed her gaze and saw the words. They were written in dark brown on the white-painted planks above the pulpit. Big, uneven letters, maybe 6 inches tall, stretching across the whole wall. "Keep to the bright below." The color looked like rust or dried blood, probably paint. I hoped it was paint. Below the words, repeated 3 times in a row, was the symbol. The circle with the line through it. Same as the one on the windshield of the Tahoe. Same greasy brown color. I stood there staring at it. My brain wasn't processing right. The mannequins with their heads turned. The candles burning with no one to light them. The words on the wall. "Keep to the bright below." "Christine, we need to leave." She didn't answer. She was still staring at the wall. "Christine, it's a warning," she said. Quiet. Flat. "I don't care what it is. We're leaving." I backed toward the door, kept the flashlight and flare gun up. The mannequins didn't move, but I didn't trust them. Didn't trust any of this. Christine followed. Slow. She kept looking at the words until we were at the threshold. I stepped out onto the dirt and reached for the door, grabbed the edge and pulled. It didn't move. I pulled harder. The door stayed where it was, wide open, 40 degrees. I planted my boots and yanked with both hands, the flare gun still gripped in my right, the mag light wedged under my arm. Nothing. It was stuck, or held, or something. And then the siren stopped, just cut off. Mid-wail. The sound dropped away so fast it left a ringing in my ears. The silence came down on us, heavy, pressing. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, that makes your chest feel tight and you're breathing too loud. I let go of the door and stepped back. It stayed open, candlelight still flickering inside. The mannequins still turned toward the aisle. Christine stood next to me, staring into the church. I didn't say anything. My hands were shaking a little. I tightened my grip on the flare gun. The silence pressed harder. I kept the mag light up and moved faster toward the visitor center. The silence felt worse than the siren. At least with the noise, you had direction. Something to move away from. Christine walked ahead of me with that steady pace she'd been using all week. Not hurried, not cautious either, just certain. That bugged me more than I wanted to admit. I swept the flashlight across the storefronts as we passed. The old assay office, a cabin with a split-rail fence, everything boarded up or locked tight. The small office building I remembered sat past the visitor center on the left side, maybe 100 yards up. I'd stopped there twice over the past year to drop off maintenance reports. Single story, green painted trim, had a little porch. Christine glanced toward the alley between the assay office and the next building. Just a quick look. Then she kept walking. "You see something?" I asked. "No." "Then why'd you look?" She didn't answer. I tightened my grip on the flare gun. The plastic felt cheap in my hand, but it was something. 4 shots total if I needed them. Probably wouldn't do much against a person, but the noise and light might buy time. The ground showed more prints now, boot treads crossing back and forth. Some looked older, the edges soft where the freeze-thaw cycle had worked on them. But a few looked fresh. I stopped and crouched next to a clear one near the edge of the street. Hiking boot. Vibram sole or something close. Modern tread. The kind you'd buy at REI. "Leon." Christine stood 10 feet ahead, waiting. "Hold on." I moved the flashlight to the left and caught something else. A drag mark. 2 parallel lines about a foot apart, cutting across the frozen dirt from the alley mouth toward the center of town. Something heavy. Pulled recently enough that the edges hadn't filled in with wind-blown dust. I stood and followed the marks with the beam. They ran maybe 15 feet before disappearing into a mess of boot prints near the old freight office. "Someone moved something," I said. "Or dragged someone." Christine looked at the marks without expression. "We need the phone. You see this?" "Yes." "Doesn't bother you?" "Everything here bothers me." She turned and kept walking toward the visitor center. I followed because leaving her alone felt worse than whatever made those marks. The visitor center sat on the right side now. Small building, maybe 20 by 30 feet. White paint peeling off the wood siding. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Bannack State Park Visitor Center. Welcome." The windows were dark. I reached the door first and put my hand on the handle. Cold metal. I turned it, and the latch clicked, but the door only opened 3 or 4 inches before it hit something solid. "Blocked," I said. Christine came up beside me. "From inside?" "Yeah." I put my shoulder against the door and pushed. The door scraped inward another inch, then another. Whatever was blocking it dragged across the floor with a metal-on-wood screech that made my teeth hurt. I planted my boots and shoved harder. The door gouged into the frame as it forced open. Wood splintered. The whole frame bent a little. The gap widened to about a foot. I could see inside now. Dark. Cold air rolling out. I clicked the mag light through the opening and swept it across the interior. A counter ran along the left wall. A desk phone sat on top. Old beige plastic with a coiled cord. A brochure rack lay on its side near the door. That's what had been blocking it. Metal frame. The kind that holds those tri-fold pamphlets about historical sites and hiking trails. Someone had wedged it against the door deliberately. I pushed again, and the door opened wide enough to slip through. I went in first with the flare gun up and the mag light cutting through the dark. The air inside was stale, not just cold, old. It smelled like dust and something else. Mildew, maybe. The kind of smell you get in a building that hasn't had heat or ventilation in weeks. I moved the flashlight across the room. The counter, a few chairs against the right wall, a coat rack in the corner with nothing on it. Behind the counter, I could see a doorway leading to a back room or office. On the far wall, there was a big corkboard where a map used to hang. I could see the clean rectangle of lighter paint where it had been. 4 rusted screws still stuck out from the corners. The map itself was gone. Just gone. Christine came in behind me. She didn't say anything, just looked around. I stepped over the brochure rack and moved to the counter. The desk phone sat right there in the middle. I picked up the receiver and brought it to my ear. Nothing. No dial tone. No static. Just dead air. I looked down at the base unit. The line cord that should have run from the phone to the wall jack had been cut. Clean cut. Not frayed or torn. Someone had used a blade or scissors and severed it about 6 inches from the phone. I set the receiver down. Lines cut. Christine stood near the doorway. She looked at the phone, but she didn't walk over. Didn't even try to check it herself. "You already knew," I said. "I figured." "How?" She turned toward the back door. "We need a different building." "Christine, one closer to the mine workings." That stopped me. "What mine workings?" "The old approach, past the creek." She said it like she was reading off a map. Matter of fact, certain. I moved the flashlight to her face. She squinted but didn't look away. "You've never been here before," I said. "You told me that in the truck." "I haven't." "Then how do you know about mine workings?" "I just do." There it was again. That flat tone. The same one she'd used when she identified the miner's mark on the Tahoe windshield. I lowered the flashlight. My hands felt cold even inside my gloves. This isn't right. "I know." "Then why are you—" "Because we're already here." She looked at me, and her eyes were clear, focused, and someone needs help. I didn't have an answer for that. She turned and walked toward the back door. It was a simple wooden door with a small window at the top. She pushed the handle and it opened without resistance. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. The back of the visitor center opened onto a narrow area between the building and a wooden fence that marked the edge of the maintained grounds. Beyond the fence, I could see scrub brush and the dark line of the creek maybe 50 yards down the slope. Christine stepped outside and I came out behind her. I swept the mag light across the ground. More boot prints. Lots of them. Overlapping in places. Most were old and wind-worn. But near the door I caught a fresh one. Clear edges. Deep tread. Vibram sole again. Same pattern as the print I'd seen near the drag marks. I crouched next to it. The print pointed away from the building, toward the fence and the creek beyond. "Someone went this way," I said. "Recently." Christine looked down the slope. "The trail's past the fence." "What trail?" "To the mine approach." I stood and followed her line of sight. I couldn't see a trail. Just darkness and scrub and the faint sound of water moving over rocks. But the boot print was real, and it led that direction. I clicked off the mag light for a second to let my eyes adjust. The moon was up now. Quarter moon, maybe. Enough light to see shapes, but not details. There, a gap in the fence line about 20 feet to the left. And past that, a worn path cutting down through the brush toward the creek. I clicked the light back on and aimed it at the path. The beam caught more prints, a whole line of them leading down. "Jesus," I said. Christine was already walking toward the fence gap. I caught up and grabbed her shoulder. "Wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "We don't know what's down there," I said. "Someone walked down there." "Yeah, and maybe they're not coming back." She turned and looked at me. Her face was pale in the flashlight's backwash, thinner than it should be. I could see the shape of her skull under her skin. "We have to check," she said. "We don't have to do anything." "You saw the diaper bag, the kid." That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Yeah, I'd seen it. A baby or toddler somewhere in this mess. Maybe with Susan Riley, maybe not. I let go of her shoulder. "Stay close, and if I say we leave, we leave." She nodded. Once. I moved past her and stepped through the fence gap. The path was narrow, maybe 18 inches wide, dirt and rock. It sloped down at a steep angle toward the creek. I took it slow, boots crunching on frozen ground, the maglite beam bouncing with each step. Christine followed close enough that I could hear her breathing. The path leveled out near the creek. The water was narrow here, maybe 10 feet across, moving fast. I could hear it rushing over rocks even though I couldn't see much detail in the dark. I swept the flashlight to the left. The path continued along the creek bank for another 30 or 40 feet before it turned and climbed again toward a dark opening in the hillside. Mine approach, just like Christine said. The opening was maybe 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Timber supports on both sides, old wood, gray and cracked, the kind that's been standing for 100 years or more. And right at the mouth of the opening, scrawled across the left timber in that same greasy brown substance, was the circle with the line through it. I stopped walking. Christine came up beside me. She saw it too. Bad air, she said quietly. Yeah. We stood there looking at it, the mark, the dark opening beyond. And then I heard something faint from inside the mine. A voice. The path leveled out near the creek and I kept the maglite steady, sweeping it left along the bank. Christine's boots crunched behind me, close enough I could hear her breathing over the water noise. The trail kept going maybe 30 or 40 feet before it turned uphill again toward what looked like a mine entrance cut into the slope. I didn't like any of this. The beam caught something up ahead. Metal posts, maybe chest high. I moved closer and the light picked out a fence section, the kind that's more suggestion than barrier. Chain link sagging between rusted poles. A couple of warning signs hung crooked on the wire, the old kind with faded yellow paint and black letters I couldn't read from here. I stopped about 10 feet out and raised the light higher. The closest post had deep scratches in the paint. Not rust, not weather damage, scratches, deliberate. I stepped up to the fence line and aimed the beam straight at it. The circle and line symbol, carved right into the metal with something sharp enough to gouge through paint and bite into the post underneath. Same mark as the Tahoe windshield. Same mark as the church wall. There, Christine said behind me. Flat voice. No surprise at all. I didn't turn around. You knew it'd be here. I figured. That was becoming her favorite phrase. I figured. Like she was pulling answers out of the air and couldn't be bothered to explain where they came from. I played the light across the rest of the fence. More signs. I got close enough to read one. Danger. Unstable ground. No entry. Another one below it. Historic site. Authorized personnel only. Both of them hanging at angles like someone had grabbed them and let go. Beyond the fence, the ground dropped off sharp. Not a cliff, but steep enough you'd have to watch your footing. The maglite beam cut down the slope and hit timber and rock about 15 feet down. An opening, maybe 6 feet across, framed with old support beams that looked like they'd been there since the 1800s. The kind of entrance they'd shore up just enough to keep the hillside from collapsing on their heads while they dug. I aimed the beam straight into the opening. The light just died, swallowed. I've got a good maglite, the kind that'll throw a beam 200 yards on flat ground, but it hit that darkness and quit maybe 10 feet in. Just black after that. Christine moved up next to me. She didn't say anything, just stood there looking at the opening. We're not going down there? I said. Someone did. She was right. I could see boot prints in the thin snow along the fence line, same tread pattern as before. They went through a gap in the chain link about 6 feet to our left, then disappeared down the slope. I moved to the gap and shone the light down. The prints tracked all the way to the opening, at least 2 sets, maybe 3. Hard to tell where they overlapped. Then the beam caught something else. Small, bright blue, sitting on a flat rock about 5 feet from the mine entrance. I leaned forward, trying to make it out. Plastic. A bottle. One of those sippy cups with the twist-on lid and handles on the sides. The kind you'd pack in a diaper bag for a toddler. My chest went tight. I swept the light left and found the second thing almost immediately. A sock. Tiny. Maybe meant for a 1-year-old. White with little yellow ducks on it. It was clean. No mud, no dirt ground into the fabric. It looked like it had been dropped maybe an hour ago. The diaper bag in the Tahoe. The cooler with the juice box. Susan Riley's wallet on the passenger seat. A kid had been here. Leon, Christine's voice, quiet. I see it. I didn't want to go down there. Every part of me that knew how to stay alive in bad situations was saying to back up, get to the main street, find another way out of this place. But if there was a kid down there, if Susan Riley had brought her kid to this godforsaken town and something had happened, something moved at the edge of the light. I snapped the beam up and caught it. Pale. Standing maybe 20 feet past the mine entrance, just outside the darkest part of the opening. The face. Same one I'd seen between the buildings on the main street. White skin, so pale it didn't look real. Eyes flat and colorless. No pupils I could make out. Just white. Staring straight at me. Closer this time. Close enough I could see it wasn't moving. Not breathing, not blinking. Just standing there in the beam like it didn't care about the light at all. My hands were shaking. I shifted the mag light to my left hand and raised the flare gun with my right. Get back, I said. Loud enough to carry. The face didn't move, didn't react. The eyes stayed on me, flat and empty. I aimed low, between us, and pulled the trigger. The flare gun kicked harder than I expected. The shell hit the dirt maybe 10 feet in front of the pale figure and erupted in a spray of red sparks and chemical smoke. The light was harsh, bright enough to hurt, throwing wild shadows across the slope and the timber framing. The figure jerked back. No sound, just a sudden movement, wrong and too fast. And then it was gone. Deeper into the dark or around the side of the opening, I couldn't tell. The flare kept burning. 30 seconds, maybe. Enough to paint everything in that ugly red glow. And that's when I saw the other shape. Slumped against the right side of the mine entrance, half sitting with his back to one of the old support timbers. A man. Dark jacket, jeans, boots. His head was tilted forward and his chest was moving in short, shallow pulls. I moved before I thought about it. Down the slope, boots sliding on loose rock and frozen dirt. Maglite in one hand and the flare gun in the other, even though it was empty now. Christine called something behind me, but I didn't stop. The flare was dying by the time I reached him. I dropped to one knee and got the maglite up. He was maybe my age, maybe younger. Short, sandy brown hair, pale face, eyes half open and unfocused. His mouth was slightly open and he was breathing fast, like he couldn't get enough air. His right hand was pressed against his left thigh and there was blood. Not a lot, but enough to soak through his jeans in a dark patch under his palm. I reached for his belt and found the key fob clipped there, rental car fob. Same brand as the Tahoe. His wallet was in his jacket pocket, torn along one edge like someone had grabbed it hard. I pulled it out and flipped it open. Montana driver's license. Eli Riley, 33 years old. Address in Bozeman. Same last name as Susan. Eli, I said, loud, close to his face. Can you hear me? His eyes shifted a little. Didn't focus, but he moved. I'm getting you out of here, I said. His lips moved. No sound came out. Just a weak exhale. I shoved the wallet in my jacket pocket and got my hands under his arms. He was lighter than I expected, or maybe adrenaline was doing the work. I dragged him back from the timber, away from the opening, boots scraping dirt and his head lolling forward. That's when the smell hit me. Faint. Sour. Wrong. It tightened my throat and made my eyes water just a little. The kind of thing you'd smell in a basement that hadn't been aired out in decades. Or in a mine shaft where the air had gone bad. I kept pulling. Got him maybe 10 feet from the entrance before I stopped to adjust my grip. His lips looked gray, not pale, gray, like he'd been breathing something toxic and it was already in his blood. Christine stepped past me. I was still kneeling next to Eli with my hands under his arms, and she just walked around us both like we weren't there. She moved toward the mine opening with that same steady pace she'd been using all night. Didn't look at Eli. Didn't ask if he was okay or if I needed help. "Christine," I said, not loud, just her name. She didn't stop. I watched her reach the edge of the opening where the old support timbers framed the entrance. She put one hand on the weathered wood. Her fingers spread flat against it. The dying flare cast red light across her profile, and I could see her face. Calm, focused, almost peaceful. That bugged me more than anything else. "The message in the church," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Keep to the bright below. It means the only safe route is down, where the old lights were." I stared at her back. What lights? Miners' candles, carbide lamps. They'd mark the safe tunnels. She leaned closer to the timbers. "That's where we need to go." She said it the same way she'd said everything tonight. Like she was reading facts off a list. Like something inside that opening was calling her by name and she'd already decided to answer. I let go of Eli and grabbed for her arm. "We're not going in there." She pulled away, hard. I'm not a small guy. I've pulled fence posts and hauled sandbags and dragged equipment through mud for 12 years. Christine weighed maybe 125 pounds, soaking wet, and she'd lost enough weight lately that I could see her collarbone through her jacket. She shouldn't have been able to pull free. She did anyway. The strength in that jerk was wrong. Not just unexpected. Wrong. Like her muscles had been replaced with something denser. I stumbled back half a step and caught myself. "Christine, stop." She didn't answer. She was reaching for the timbers again with both hands now, leaning into the opening. The air changed. It got heavier. That's the only way I can describe it. Like the pressure dropped, or the oxygen thinned, or both. My ears didn't pop, but my head started to pulse. A slow throb right behind my eyes that made my vision blur at the edges. I've been at 12,000 feet before. I've worked on ridge lines where the air gets thin enough that you have to stop and breathe every 20 steps. This felt similar, but worse, faster. Like the mine was pulling the air in and not giving it back. I put one hand against the rock wall to steady myself. My fingers were shaking. The flare was almost out. Just a dull red glow now, barely enough to see by. I blinked hard and forced my eyes to focus past Christine toward the inside of the opening. That's when I saw them. More faces, pale and flat and motionless. Deeper in the dark, maybe 15 or 20 feet back from the entrance, standing in a loose group. I counted 4, maybe 5. The dying light didn't reach far enough to be sure. They didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there staring out at us with those same colorless eyes. Fixed, waiting. My chest went tight. I raised the flare gun even though it was empty and my hand was shaking hard enough that the barrel wobbled. Didn't matter. I needed to hold something. "Christine, get back here now." She ignored me. She was halfway through the opening. I still had 3 flares in my jacket pocket. I dropped the mag light and fumbled one out with my left hand. My fingers didn't want to cooperate. The flare was cold and smooth, and I almost dropped it twice before I got it loaded into the breech and snapped the gun shut. The old timbers framing the entrance were stacked in a loose pile just inside to the left. Dry wood, probably 100 years old, the kind that'd go up fast if you gave it a reason. I didn't aim at the faces. I aimed at the timber pile. I pulled the trigger. The kick was just as hard as the first time. The shell arced up and hit the stacked wood about chest high. It lodged between 2 beams and erupted in the same red chemical burn, hotter and brighter than the first one because it was confined in a smaller space. The flames caught immediately. Old wood burns fast when it's dry, and hasn't seen water in decades. The fire climbed the stack in under 10 seconds, orange and yellow mixing with the red flare glow, throwing heat and smoke out of the opening in a rolling black cloud. The pale shapes jerked back, not smooth, not natural. They moved the same wrong way the first one had, too fast, joints bending at angles that didn't make sense. And then they were gone, deeper into the tunnel or around a corner or just gone. The smoke poured out thick and acrid. I could smell burning pitch and something else underneath it. Something chemical and old. Christine tried to push past the fire. She got 3 steps in before the heat drove her back. I saw her raise one arm to shield her face, and then she stumbled backward out of the opening, coughing. I thought that was it. I thought she'd come back. She didn't. She turned and ran. Not toward me. Not toward the path. She ran straight up the slope to the left, toward the gap between 2 buildings at the edge of the mine approach, and disappeared into the smoke-choked space before I could move. "Christine!" I started after her. Got maybe 5 feet. Behind me, Eli made a sound. A wet, choking gasp. I turned and saw him sliding sideways off the support timber where I'd left him. His hand slipped off his thigh and his head rolled forward and he hit the dirt on his side. I stopped. Christine or Eli. One choice, 2 seconds to make it. I went back for Eli. I got my hands under his arms again and hauled him up. He didn't help. His legs dragged and his head lolled and his weight was dead weight, the kind that pulls down instead of balancing. I started dragging him toward the path, back the way we'd come, boots slipping on loose rock and frozen dirt. The alarm bell started again. It was faster this time. The same low metallic clang, but the rhythm was double speed, overlapping itself, building into that same rising siren wail. My head was still pulsing and the sound made it worse. I gritted my teeth and kept pulling. Then the lights came on, weak yellow street lamps, the old-style kind with curved glass covers and exposed bulbs. They flickered once, twice, then held steady, casting dim pools of light along the main street above us. I hadn't seen any lamps when we drove in, I was sure of that. But there they were, glowing like they'd been on all along. I dragged Eli up the slope. My shoulders burned and my boots kept sliding, but I didn't stop. The fence gap was 20 feet away, then 10. Then I was through and back on the path between the visitor center and the fence line. The siren kept climbing. I pulled Eli all the way to the back door of the visitor center, then past it, around the side of the building toward the main street. My lungs were burning and my hands were cramping, but I didn't let go. When I reached the street, I turned left toward the entrance road. The gate was maybe 150 yards down. I could see it in the yellow lamplight, the same green tube steel, the same chain looped through the frame. But the padlock was hanging open. I stopped, stared at it. The chain was still there, the same thick silver links. But the padlock that had been locked solid 15 minutes ago was now hanging loose on the end of the chain, open and unlatched. I didn't question it. I dragged Eli faster. My phone was in my pocket. I let go of Eli with one hand and pulled it out. The screen lit up, 1 bar of signal, thin, but there. I dialed 911 and hit speaker, then shoved the phone in my jacket pocket and got both hands back under Eli's arms. I kept dragging while it rang. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at Bannack State Park, I said. My voice came out rough and too loud. I've got an injured man, leg wound, heavy bleeding. I need an ambulance and I need it now. Sir, can you tell me your exact location? Bannack, the ghost town. Off Highway 278, the entrance road. I'm at the gate. I reached the gate and pushed through. The chain scraped against the post, but the open padlock didn't stop me. I pulled Eli clear of the gate and lowered him onto the frozen dirt on the outside of the fence line. The dispatcher was asking more questions. I answered what I could. Yes, he's breathing. Yes, he's bleeding. Left thigh, soaked through. No, I don't know how long ago. 10 minutes maybe, 15. I pulled off my work shirt. The undershirt underneath was thermal and gray, and I left it on. I tore the work shirt into strips using my multi-tool and packed the fabric against Eli's leg, pressing hard with both hands. Blood soaked through immediately, but I kept the pressure steady. The dispatcher told me help was on the way. She told me to keep pressure on the wound. She told me to stay on the line. I stayed. Eli's breathing was shallow. His eyes were closed. I kept my hands pressed against his leg and watched the entrance road. Headlights appeared maybe 12 minutes later. A sheriff's vehicle, light bar flashing red and blue. It pulled up fast and stopped 20 feet away. The door opened and a woman in a deputy's uniform got out. Dark hair in a tight bun, utility belt, radio on her shoulder. "I'm Deputy Morse," she said. She moved fast, dropping to one knee next to Eli and pulling a medical kit from her belt. "What happened?" "Found him at a mine entrance, leg wound. He's lost a lot of blood." She didn't ask more questions. She cut away the fabric I'd packed and examined the wound, then applied a pressure bandage and secured it tight. Eli didn't react. More headlights, a white truck with a green stripe and a state park emblem on the door. A man in a ranger uniform got out, tall, maybe mid-40s, graying brown hair under a brimmed hat. "Maxwell Diaz," he said. "Park Service. What's going on?" I told him, fast and direct. The open SUV, the slashed tires, the mine entrance, the pale faces, Christine running into the smoke. I didn't leave anything out, and I didn't try to make it sound reasonable. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at Gloria Morse. She nodded once. "We need fire support," Maxwell said. He pulled his radio. "And search and rescue. 2 missing persons, possibly more." Gloria was checking Eli's pulse. "This one needs transport, now." Maxwell called it in. I heard him request an ambulance, fire crew, and additional personnel. He gave coordinates and described the situation as a possible structural fire with missing persons inside a historical site. The ambulance arrived 18 minutes later. Paramedics took over Eli and loaded him onto a gurney. Gloria went with them to give a report. Maxwell stayed with me. 2 volunteers showed up in a red pickup, both men, both wearing reflective vests and carrying flashlights. Maxwell briefed the men under a minute. "I can take you in," I said. "I know where she went." Maxwell nodded. "Lead the way." I turned toward the gate. It clanked shut. I was still 5 feet away when it happened. The green tube steel swung hard and fast on its hinges and slammed into the latch post with a metallic bang that echoed across the valley. Then the chain moved. It slithered up the post on its own, wrapping around the frame and through the latch in 3 smooth loops before the padlock snapped shut with a clean metallic click. No hand touched it. No person was near it. The chain moved itself. I grabbed the bars and pulled hard. They didn't budge. The padlock was locked solid again. Maxwell stepped up next to me. He saw what I saw, the chain that had been open 30 seconds ago. The gate that had just slammed shut on its own. He didn't say anything for maybe 5 seconds. Then he pulled a bolt cutter from his truck. It took him 4 tries to cut through 1 link. The metal was harder than it should have been. When the link finally broke, the chain fell away and Maxwell pushed the gate open. "Stay here," he said. "I know where she went." "You're a civilian. Stay here." He looked back at Gloria, who'd returned from the ambulance. "We'll find her." Gloria nodded. She had her radio and flashlight. The 2 volunteers moved up behind her. Maxwell went through first. Gloria followed. The volunteers came last. I watched them walk up the main street under those weak yellow lamps. Their flashlight beams cut left and right across storefronts. The siren was still going, that same rising and falling wail. They passed Hotel Mead, past the church with the open door, kept moving toward the visitor center and the creek beyond. Then they turned the corner past the assay office and disappeared. I stood at the gate and waited. The siren cut off mid-ring. Just stopped, same as before, leaving that heavy silence pressing down. The yellow street lamp stayed on, flickering a little, casting long shadows. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Nobody came back. I looked through the bars toward the mine approach. I couldn't see it from the entrance road, but I could see the smoke. It was thinning now, rising in a lighter gray column against the night sky instead of the thick black roll from before. The fire was dying, or already dead. I walked back to the state truck and climbed into the bed. Both driver's side tires were still flat, rubber sagging against the rims. I sat on the wheel well and held the flare gun across my knees. 2 shots left, 2 flares still in my pocket. The town sat quiet under those yellow lamps. No movement, no sound. I thought about Christine reaching for those timbers, the way she'd pulled free when I grabbed her, the strength that shouldn't have been there. I thought about her running into the smoke instead of coming back. I thought about the message in the church, keep to the bright below. She'd gone down, into the mine or past it or somewhere deeper, where the old lights were, where she thought it was safe. I didn't believe it was safe. I believed whatever had pulled Susan Riley out of that Tahoe and cut the tires and locked the gates was still down there, still waiting. And I believed Christine had walked right to it. I sat in the truck bed and watched the gate. The chain hung in its loops, padlock shut tight. The bars threw shadows across the frozen dirt. Maxwell and Gloria and the 2 volunteers didn't come back. The smoke kept thinning until it was just a faint haze catching the moonlight. I checked my phone. The single bar of signal was gone. Just no service in the corner. I couldn't follow her. The gate was sealed, and even if I cut the chain again, I didn't know if it had let me through or slammed shut the second I tried. I understood that now. Christine had gone where I couldn't follow, and whatever had taken the Rileys, whatever had left that diaper bag and sippy cup and tiny sock at the mine entrance, whatever had carved those symbols and cut the phone line and locked us in, it hadn't finished yet. It was still being paid. I sat in the cold with the empty flare gun in my hands and waited for someone to come back. Nobody did.